into what's probably your nth meeting on Zoom for the day, week, et cetera, et cetera. So let me start sharing my screen. That's the first thing that I'll do. Here. Okay. So basically, what I want to cover today is what I'm planning to do with my course this fall. And this is a course on the politics of Latin America, as Mike said. The enrollment is about 170 students, so we're talking about a large lecture course. This is a 300 level course, meaning these are not new students that are taking this course. They've been at McGill at least for a year. And the general format that I'm following for the course, I'll talk more specifically about the assessments, but the general format that I'm following for the course in terms of delivery is that I'll have flexible lectures that are recorded. I use Camtasia to record my lectures. You can use whatever you want, but I use Camtasia. And then we'll have fixed conferences, meaning the students will be divided in different groups, and those will meet on Zoom or some other platform to be discussed. And there will be a discussion board alternative for the participation on those fixed conferences. Just one short note on recording your lectures. Jonathan Stern has great material on this, and I recommend that you go to his blog for this. But the one thing that I would say is, if you are using any multimedia as part of your lecture, don't use links. Embed whatever content you have to the lecture itself. It is pretty well proven that if you provide the links, people don't go and watch the stuff. So it's better if you use time in your recorded lecture to show any multimedia that you want to show. That's my 2 cents on this. Let me get right into the assessment strategy. The objectives that I had with the assessment strategy that I devised for this course have to do with trying to, of course, to assess students on content in a interesting, compelling way, and make sure that they are getting what they need to be getting from the course. But also, and this is pretty important to most of us, I was trying to manage a time management arrangement that works for myself and for TAs, so that I'm not generating all this crazy amount of work for myself or for the TAs themselves. And the other concern that I had was to try to minimize concerns about academic integrity, which are always present, but even more so under an environment of remote teaching, right? And so in past semesters, what I've done, for this same class, I've had exams, I've had participation, I've had, something called a talk attendance report. I basically have students attend some talk on campus, off campus, on issues related to the course, and a research paper. For the fall, it's a completely different set of assessments. So I'm going to be talking about 4 different assessments that I'm planning to use for this course. The first one is a pretty straightforward one, but I wanted to cover it because it does generate some problems, which is participation. And this is conference participation in fixed sessions. This is the preferred way of having students participate. The conference participation I plan to record to the extent that's possible. And this means that perhaps not all participation will be recorded, but yes, the parts in which the TAs are conveying information, so that if students cannot participate, they get that information once they can see the recordings on my courses. There will be a flexible alternative for this participation on discussion boards on my courses. I'm consulting with ITS in terms of how to make discussion boards that are specific to each conference. So I don't want a huge, massive discussion board for all 170 students. I want them to be grouped into their conference groups of about 20 students and have them discuss at that scale. I think that is, first, pretty important for engagement, but also, actually not logistically not as straightforward as you would think. So you may want to get indications on how to do this specifically if this is what you're planning to do as well. So in terms of time management, this does require a little bit more TA work than usual, given the discussion boards. Usually what we have is TAs grade participation in conferences, and that's a one-step process. This is a two-step process, so it will be a little bit more complex on that end. One central question about participation that I've encountered has to do with whether to make the fixed and the flexible alternatives mutually exclusive or not. Basically, are students only being able to participate on the fixed session if they attend, or can they complement their participation grade by adding to the discussion board, right? And this gets into some murky areas, especially for seminars and smaller classes, because, you know, students may feel more inclined or more at ease with participating on discussion boards, and at the same time, you do want to create this engagement on the live sessions. And so there's a choice there to be made. In a large lecture course like this one, I'm choosing to have them be not mutually exclusive, so students can participate in both ways. If I were teaching a seminar, this is not what I would do. Let's put it that way, okay? But in this case, I think it's easier to manage this way, okay? Then the second assessment strategy that I'm following is that for each week of class, I'm designing a very short quiz on my courses using the quizzes tool on my courses. This is a set of questions on the readings and lectures. Again, the lectures are recorded, right? On an average, this is 5 questions, about a 10 to 15 minute assessment that I'm planning. These are auto-graded. These are either graded as a multiple choice question or as a single word answer. And they are graded both for completion and for accuracy of the responses. What this means is that the students get a base grade simply for logging in and taking the quiz, and then they get more grade if they answer correctly. The idea here is to have students both participate in the quiz and take the quiz, an incentive to just take the quiz, but also an incentive to take the quiz while being moderately prepared for the quiz, right? What I do is I separate the access time for the quiz and the time that they have to complete the quiz. I'm generous on both. So it's 72 hours. They have a 72-hour frame to enter the quiz. I recommend in the syllabus and in indications to the students that they should do the reading at 10 hours before they start the quiz. And then once they access the quiz, it's open everything. I'm not asking for them to not to use any materials. They can use whatever they want, but they have 1 hour to complete that quiz. And again, it's planned to be completed in 10, 15 minutes. So I'm being overly generous here. This is a low stakes assessment. This is not a major thing. This is 10%. In terms of integrity, as we know, as we've read, as we've heard multiple times, low stakes assessments are usually less likely to result in cheating. I'm also making this open book, open everything. I just want them to engage with the materials and make sure that they are, attending the lectures. That's my main objective here. Of course, I want them to get the answer right? So there's some grade component to that as well. I do ask them also to fulfill an honor pledge, which is the following. You can read it on the screen. I affirm that I have not given or received any help basically on this assignment, and that this work is my own. The only thing that I do not want them doing is cooperating with one another on the quizzes. That's the only thing. I kind of want them to do this individually after having done the readings and attended the lectures. Do honor pledges help work? We'll see. So again, the main idea here is to encourage students to keep up with course material, okay? And that's the idea. I'll talk a little bit about the time management in a bit about what this looks like. The third set of assessments that I use is a set of movie essays. These are shorter essays that ask students to connect lectures, readings with a specific movie that is assigned. Here, I provide very specific prompts that they need to answer to in the essays. These are not open essays. It requires students to answer those specific prompts and not write a general essay on the movie. There are no right, wrong answers. It's not that I'm looking for something specific. I'm looking for them to engage with certain analytical questions that ask them to make this link between fictional movies that I'm having them watch, and the readings and lectures that I'm providing. The prompts are made available 1 week before the due date. There are strict word limits. These are very short essays, 750 words. To create more flexibility, I'm assigning 4 movies, but I'm asking them to submit essays for 3 of these movies, so they can choose out of 1 of those essays. I do not allow them to write all 4 essays for grading purposes, right? So in terms of integrity, one important point here is that having an essay format that has a specific prompt that asks them to reply to specific questions actually prevents integrity in the sense of cheating off the internet. They cannot copy the essays out of anywhere else. These are questions that I devised according to this movie, to the specific course, to the specific readings. It's highly unlikely that they'll be able to encounter any material covering this off the internet. In terms of copying from one another, these are, essays that require fairly individualized answers, and so I'm hoping that this will prevent any sort of cheating in the class. Also, in terms of time management, the specific prompts allow for an easier grading rubric than open essays. Basically, I provide the TAs with a grading rubric that is quite specific in terms of answering the questions and on what concepts I'm looking for students to engage with, specific parts of the movie that they can mention, different things, storylines, et cetera, that speak to specific points in those questions. So again, avoiding open essay questions is a good strategy here to minimize how much time it takes to grade this essays. Also, strict word limits on everything. For large classes, I think that's key. The final assessment strategy that I use is a pretty well-known format. This is, a take-home final exam that's 35% of their final grade. The movie essays are 15% each. This exam is designed in a way in which it has 2 sets of questions. It has some short, more objective questions that asks them to engage with certain concepts in pretty specific ways. Again, these are open books, so it's not asking them to just search for a concept and plug it in, but more sophisticated than that, still pretty short and objective, and then more long subjective questions that ask them to analyze different questions and come up and support certain positions, et cetera, et cetera. Here I'm going with a bank of questions, so not all students respond to the same questions. I've taught this class a couple of times before. I have multiple questions for this, so I'm relying on this. I'm creating some new ones. This is something that I always do. I save all the assessments that I've done in the past, and I repurpose them as much as I can. Again, each question has a strict word limit for answers. Both short and long questions need to be answered within a specific word limit, so I'm asking them to edit themselves significantly. For this purpose, I'm also separating timeframes. This is something that you may have heard multiple times, but I want to cover again. It's important to have one period in which the students can access the exam and start the exam. And in this case, this is a 48-hour period that they have to actually enter the exam and see the questions. And then once they start, their clock starts to run, and they have, in this case, 12 hours to complete the exam. So again, pretty generous, right? Because this is an exam that's usually designed for, 2-3 hours at most. I'm giving them 12 hours. And again, this allows me also to ask them to edit themselves, to not just write, but actually I enforce a word limit given the 12 hours to complete the exam. There's also a grace period that I allow for, so it's 12 hours plus 1 more hour of grace period if there's any sort of issues, technological issues with submission, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, this is pretty straightforward. And again, it in terms of time management, given that these are fairly specific questions, not open questions, I can create a grading rubric that is quite specific to this exam. And this minimizes the time that TAs spend actually grading the exam. So let me get to the 2 points that are sort of the things that have been recurring that I talked about in all of these assessments. One is time management. So the first thing is, and I should be clear here, my point here is, I mean, the more time you spend on assessment design, on writing your questions, on writing your exams, on writing your essays, et cetera, the less time you'll spend grading. You and your TAs will spend grading. So I'm making that very purposeful trade-off here. And I am spending quite a bit of time thinking about and actually writing the different assessments that I'm asking them to fulfill for this class. This is, again, really purposeful. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this end of the bargain, right? But my hopes and in my experience, this results in less time grading. The quizzes are auto-graded. There's clear grading rubrics for essays and for the take-home exam. And the participation part, well, it's the participation part. There's no way around that. And one central point that I would recommend for everybody teaching in large lecture courses is just enforce word limits. Just be more generous with the time that you give students to complete the assignment if need be, but have them write in, fairly limited space, so that first, they have to be more strict and to the point. Second, the grading, you don't have TAs grade sort of endless number of words, et cetera, and yourself. So that is pretty important in this sense in terms of for time management. In terms of, well, this does result in a focus on quality over quantity of assessments. I'm not burdening them with a ton of writing, with a ton of assessments. If they carry through with the quizzes week after week, this should take, again, 10, 15 minutes per week to fulfill those quizzes. The essays, these are 3-page essays, really short essays, and the final exam will not be that long either, right? So we're talking about quality over quantity here in terms of assessments. In terms of integrity concerns, a phrase that you've heard multiple times in the last few months, this is about risk mitigation, not suppression. So there will be, some cheating on the margins, and I'm going to live with that, and it is what it is. But it is about minimizing that risk. It is about minimizing the possibility for that and minimizing the extent to which students feel compelled to cheat for the assessments for this class. So one strategy that we've heard about, and I try to implement this here, is have low stakes frequent assessments. Are the weekly quizzes, and a manageable workload. This, according to research, results in less cheating. I'm choosing to believe in research. Most of us choose to believe in research every now and then. So this is one of those opportunities that I have to believe in research. And the other point is that essays with specific prompts minimize risks of cheating, specifically off the internet, but also within the class. It makes it so that it's easy to compare one answer to the other if that is necessary. So those are the ways in which I am thinking about mitigating this risk with integrity. Of course, with participation, that is not entirely a problem in most cases. So let me finish up with what I would do if I were teaching a different class, things that I would like to do. So I'm a big fan of group work, and so if I had the capacity to manage this, I would have them do group research papers with recorded presentations and live discussions of those presentations. This is a format that I've used before and I really enjoy and I really like. So this is one thing that I would do. Another thing that I like is oral exams. I went to university in a different country, in Argentina. Every single exam that I had was an oral exam. I think they are great. I think it's a great way to assess students. I think it's a great way to develop oral skills. If possible, I would do oral exams over Zoom. These would be recorded. I would make the recording only accessible to the student who is taking the exam, and they would have a chance to revise and see whether they want to challenge their grade, et cetera. But oral exams is something that for smaller classes, I would really like to do. And for all sort of research papers, and this I've done in the past, I would build into a cumulative assessment of having a proposal, an annotated bibliography, an outline, and a draft, and all of these built with peer review processes. This I've done in the past with my seminars, and I like and enjoy very much. So that's what I would do if size class allowed. Now, in terms of questions, I know there's some on the chat, but I would say, I mean, I can answer questions about the assessments that I just presented, or about the strategy, or about all the problems with it, or we can use this session also to brainstorm a bit about other potential assessments and sort of exam strategies, et cetera, that you are interested in and that you want to discuss. With that, I'll stop my sharing of the screen. The presentation will be available, and again, open up for questions. Mike, I don't know how you want to manage